nationally, but also internationally, what we are doing. And it's a great opportunity for me to present here. Thank you very much again. And hello, everyone. Mihal introduced me very well, actually, so I can skip those parts. And yes, and he's right about my name. I usually like using Serhan. When somebody called me Ali, sometimes I didn't realize, when people call me. So it's fine. It's still my name, of course. Then I will talk about invasive species generally, because my study subject is all on the invasive species, especially non-native freshwater fish species, and their management, their impact, especially to native fauna, flora, and their proper management. In the end, eventually, our ultimate goal is to manage them in the best way we can. So I will be talking about these subjects, but coming from Turkey, I will outline also the importance of Turkey. So before I started, yeah, I'm from Muğla, Sıtkı Koçman University, but I have also a second affiliation from Poland, Łódź University, and time to time I'm going there and giving some lectures and joining the projects, but it's not been possible for the last 2 years when the pandemic started. But it's yeah, I have also a second affiliation. So I will talk about a bit Muğla, Sıtkı Koçman University, and the Faculty of Fisheries where I am working. If you don't know, I will give some summary about the Muğla. It's a city which is located in southwestern Turkey, and along the Turkish Aegean coast. As you see, it's a when you look at Turkey, you see it's located in the southwestern of Turkey, and it is quite well known with the popular tourist resorts. Maybe you have already heard or been, I don't know, but they are quite well-known, famous touristic places. But Muğla as a city center, where our campus is established, is the closest coastline is 25 kilometers. So we are not just nearby the sea. Usually the students thought that, oh, okay, it's good, let's go there, and because university is just nearby the sea, then we can enjoy or something. But it's not actually. It's not that far, but still we have kind of almost 700 meters of above from the sea level, and the campus is actually it's big, really big. When I was preparing these slides, I also realized that it's really big, because when you work inside, you don't feel like that. It's such a big university or campus, and these figures, 9 faculties, vocational schools, 13 research and application centers. I didn't even know so many facilities we had, but anyway, we have more than 32,000 students, and we have more than 1,000 full-time academic staff in the university. And my faculty is also it's like been a kind of a new building. We moved here like 7-8 years ago, but we were in another building actually. But the faculty started its educational activities in the 2004, and we have 3 different departments, which one of them is Marine and Inland Water Science and Technology, where I am working. Actually, I am head of department, and we call it the basic science. It's a shortcut name. And we have also aquaculture and fishing and seafood processing technology departments. In total, we have 3 different departments. And in recent years, we didn't receive so much intention by the students. And in this year, for instance, we have only 3 students selected our faculty, which is really bad actually. But I think it's the main problem and overall, I mean, common problem in the world that we are losing our popularities. But it's not the case in everywhere probably. So I will give some outline, you know, what I am going to talk about. It will be on invasive species, and I will try to explain why Turkey is important, and also what is the role of the freshwater fishes, non-native freshwater fishes. So it's like we discussed before with Mihal. I concerned that, you know, I don't have much about the parasites or something, but he told me that it's not important. Just give us to your studies, you know, what you are doing, then we can recognize what people in the other parts of the world are doing. So, but still, I will try to, you know, link our studies with the disease and parasites and generally pathogens. And I will talk about our projects, articles, and you know, ongoing projects and future work, current projects and completed projects and future work. So I will try to be brief as much as I can, but I have more than 40 slides, so don't hold your breath too much. Okay, why invasive species are quite you know, the issue here, because it's usually acknowledged as the third cause of biodiversity loss worldwide. So it's when you look at this figure, it hasn't changed much in recently because it's not so up to date figure probably, but still it is the case that the invasive species is a big problem in the biodiversity loss. I will talk about a bit in detail, but as you see, after pollution, all types of pollution, and the obstruction of groundwater, which is habitat destruction, actually, it is the one of the main factors in biodiversity loss. So they have actually 2 aspects. One of them is the ecological impacts, the other one is the socioeconomic impacts. So we are trying to understand both because they are linked quite intensely. So I will talk about the, you know, mostly adverse effects, unfortunately, because there are some positive effects as well, but usually ecological and socioeconomical effects are usually detrimental, not the beneficial. So when you look at this, you know, like I said, it's mostly ecological. There are lots of information here. I won't go in detail because it's written there. But the most problematic issue is that if any non-native species is a predator, then it means a quick and effective termination of native or endemic species. But regardless of the species predator or not, it can carry some parasites and disease. Also, it can compete for food and habitat and habitat for reproduction, habitat for food. So they can even change whole the ecosystem structure because it's in balance, you know, usually. And when some species introduced outside of the system, that means it would be quite problematic. So there would be some economic issues. Then I will give you some more detail about it. But of course, always we don't talk about the detrimental impact, but sometimes positive effects that could be, you know, usually they introduce this species as a aquatic products when they do it intentionally. They want to enhance, especially these aquatic products, like some economic fish species, for instance, they can introduced all over the world. Some species is quite economic spaces in terms of sport fishing or food or fisheries. So that's also aquarium, pet hobby. These are the whole the big market actually in all over the world. But uh, all of these activities also carries a big risk of introduction of these non-native fish species. So we shouldn't separate these factors, but consider together. So when we work in non-native fish species, we also work in negative and positive effects together. And recently there is this a big venture which started I think 3 years ago in a meeting. It's actually a cost action which is so-called InvaCost. It's on completely the economic cost of biological invasions worldwide, and they produced more than 50 papers so far. What I want to take your attention to how much cost these invasive species could cause. Like you see, it's a minimum number, 1.288 trillion dollar, and when you do it between 1970 and 2070, it's like with annual mean cost of 26.8 billion. Actually, it's more dramatical figure is here. Only in 2070, it's like 162.7 billion cost, and this is still going on process because it was really difficult to find this data, because nobody is recording this kind of data. Nobody is recognizing the how big this problem is. So it's growing actually. These numbers probably it's growing. And as in Turkey, we didn't do anything with this issue when we started a couple of months ago. We started to gather available information, but which is not that available actually. So we are having these difficulties. But this venture, like I said, started to people's attention how costly the invasive species, and when we do nothing about it, then it means it will cause much and much in the near future. So I will talk about the importance of Turkey, especially in terms of invasion biology. The main issue here is the biogeography of the Turkey. Geographical structure of the Turkey is quite, is quite suitable for non-native species because it combines Asia. I mean, it holds unique parts of Asia, Europe, and even some elements from Africa. So it's quite kind of passing area. That means also it's the mountain area. That means there are really strong isolation mechanisms going on. Then that means there are really rich biodiversity and high endemism. These isolation mechanisms, in the end, resulting in some speciation. That means there we have lots of endemic species, probably more than most of the Europe, and we have different climatic conditions. Especially, there are many microclimate classes in Turkey. So that means it's sometimes favorable for the invasives, which that could be some warmer places, colder places, but the invasive species are quite diverse. So some some features would be quite suitable for them. For instance, new reservoirs. It's been becoming quite common in Turkey recently for irrigation, for drinking water purposes. So it's a number of the reservoirs increasing, and it brings also the risk of the non-native species introductions in these reservoirs. And then most of them is connected with the natural rivers and streams. So in those areas endemic species are quite being affected by non-natives. And in Turkey, more than 70 million people, but also, unfortunately, we had low public awareness about the non-native species, invasive species. So we are trying to increase, actually, as one of our primary target, try to increase this public awareness, because when you put some penalties, it's not so effective. But if we increase this public awareness, that would differ much, probably. That would matter much. And yeah, we need to also specific regulations on invasive species. We don't have a strong, actually, legislation on the management of the invasive species in Turkey. We are trying to align with the European Union rules in terms of this, but we have to also consider the geographical structure and the cultural structure of the people. In that case, we have to establish more, better communication among the stakeholders as well. So, like I said, as you see, there are 35 biodiversity hotspots all over the world, and one of them is especially Southern Europe and Aegean part of Turkey and Mediterranean part of Turkey. So not along the other parts of Anatolia, but especially the coastline, as you see, is quite peculiar to endemism. So we need to. It's like I said. It's when you look at Anatolia, it holds especially unique elements of European, Asian, and even American elements. Like I said a couple of minutes ago. So we have, actually, like I said, a rich biodiversity and high endemism, but it also brings the risk of having extinct species, and these numbers are keep increasing, actually, especially the fish species. After 2070, when this paper was published, no, actually it's 2015. It says 11 new species after this paper has been discovered, but it's been increasing and increasing. Sometimes I can't even follow, the speed of the discovering of new species in Turkey, especially freshwater fish species, because of the high endemism. But regardless, it's increasing, and that means we have to be more careful about the impact of non-native and invasive species. So I participated this study, how peculiar, how fragile of the Mediterranean climate regions, actually, which are 5 of them in the world. We always think that, oh, okay, this is only one Mediterranean region. It is, but when you look at the climate region types, it's actually 5 of them. One of them is in the United States, in California. The other one is in central Chile, South Africa, and Australia. And in this study, we just collated data of introduced species and how they affect the endemism. And when we found taxonomic similarity and functional similarity is quite high, and that means the whole ichthyofauna is becoming homogenized by the introduced species, which is really bad sign, actually. And the species is usually large-bodied, non-migratory, and higher ecological tolerance, and especially phenotypic plasticity, high phenotypic and ecologic plasticity. and they had these fast population growth rates. They are the major problems with these species. So unfortunately, we lost 4 species from the whole biodiversity heritage of the world in Turkey. These are as you see from the different regions, but as you see in all of the regions, there were more than one or two or three introduced species. It wasn't possible to find out that, only reason of being extinct of these species is because of the introduced species, but we were sure that they played a big role in this. So we still have critically endangered, and vulnerable species that we have to consider and keep safe them from the non-natives. This paper published in 2015, so we need to update it for sure. It's been like more than 5 years, 6 years now, but the figures probably it's much worse than. But as you see, the overall establishment success was more than 60%. And then translocated spaces in translocated spaces is much more dramatical, because it's like the fully successful establishment rate. And the main vectors actually intentional introduction by fisheries and aquaculture, and we have some common non-native invasive species. I will talk about a bit more in next slides, but maybe these rates are now higher, but in 2015 when we published this study, it was also higher, because 4.8 species per decade, which 3.1 species established a decade, which is really high rate actually. And then it's as you see from this figure right hand side above, especially after this is the main pattern in the world, but after 16 and 17s it's accelerated in cumulatively. It's becoming more concerning. So we organized this workshop, which was actually kind of milestone for our studies, because we were able to collect very pioneering researchers from all over the world. We discussed the what is the problem, the invasive freshwater fish species in the Mediterranean, and then we proposed some new approach. And like I said, it was really nice gathering, because we produced, after 2 years, we produced a dedicated issue in Fisheries Management and Ecology journal. And then, as you see, these papers we discussed there, and then we published out of this workshop, are still modern techniques, are still important. They don't disappear their importance actually. For instance, the use of molecular tools in invasive biology, it's been increasingly applied in the invasive biology, and using stable isotope analysis also quite important to understand the impact actually, isotopic niche and niche overlap between native and non-native fish species. So it's a kind of very nice way to map conservation priorities in the Mediterranean. So after that, we managed to follow up this venture by doing some risk identification of the non-native species, and as you see, some species has been yielded by very high scores. So we decided to work on these fish species because they are widespread, and they had this possibility to impact very badly. So one of these species is Carasius gibelio, so-called gibel carp. Um, Maybe you have this in Czech Republic. I don't know. Yeah. You should probably, if I'm not mistaken. But in 2012, in this, I mean, out of this workshop that I mentioned to you before, we were able to produce 2 papers to see what are the impacts and how they disperse to Turkey and where they disperse in Turkey, which habitats are more suitable than the others. These were quite important papers for us because we recognized that these fish species are quite successful because of it had wide dietary preference, adaptations to different habitats and environmental conditions. At that time, it was exported to some countries like Iraq and Syria, and was considered valuable for recreational and commercial fisheries. But it is not the case now. This exportation was stopped, but still in some regions, it's locally important. But still, it's quite the most widespread invasive freshwater fish species in Turkey, and then we are trying to understand. As you see, especially in the western part of Turkey, it's been widespread, and the reason that we couldn't find these species in Anatolia or some other in eastern part of Turkey, probably lack of the sufficient number of studies. We couldn't go there, and we couldn't study enough. But the other reason is that this kind of fish species is always not all the time, but usually entering to Turkey from the Europe through some transboundary rivers, passing over our borders, coming from usually Bulgaria and Greece, and first the European part of Turkey, then through some deliberate introduction to the Anatolia, because otherwise it's not possible to pass through two straits, which is salty, marine environments. So there was only one way to these spaces, and other spaces enter the Anatolia, is that somebody just bring them to there. So we spotted these fish species in trace in 2086. I mean 80s, rather to say, and it's because morphologically quite resembles the common carp, and common carp is being stocked in Turkey quite commonly, actually, and widely. So it's been undeliberately and accidentally, this fish species also distributed everywhere. And the other fish species, top-mouthed gudgeon, Pseudoraspora parva. I put these fish species because the importance of these fish species in terms of invasion, it carries a very deadly pathogen. Actually, it's called Spiracetum destruans. It's a unicellular eukaryotic parasite, and when it's obligate extra actually cellular parasite, because this fish species, top-mouthed gudgeon, is the healthy carrier of these parasites. But when it's passed through the other endemic fish species, it becomes quite deadly, and all over the world, it's been known with the main trait, the biodiversity, but not only the biodiversity or endemic species, but also aquaculture industry, as well as recreational fishing, because when it lead to mass mortalities in both aspect, which it means a big loss of economical and biodiversity loss. So we were able to find this parasite in Turkey. Probably it was like that because it was first found in a experimental conditions in 2005 in England. But this one, when we found this in 2015, it was the first time that we spotted in this parasite in the wild. So it is from the Sarıçay stream in Muğla, and we were able to determine the parasites in almost all organs, and we monitored it for a year. And as you see, its number of the prevalence, it increased actually. And the another concerning the another concerning issue is that when we monitoring longer, that we realize that this also is causing the decline of the endemic fish species, probably circumstantially, not directly, because there would be some other reasons for that. I mean, we can't say that okay, the only factor of declining of endemic species is this parasite, but we believe that it played really a great role to negatively impact these endemic fish species. This is the outputting paper, and as you see, it's usually the most concerning issue is that it could harm a big industry, sea bass farms industry, which represents over 400 million annually euros. So that means between 600 and 4,200 million mounts per year. That is quite big economical issue actually. And then this is probably probably it is the case. It is the case for your country, but when it comes to biodiversity, usually the decision makers is not so interested in. But when it comes to economical laws, they really started to interested in these problems. So another widespread species, pumpkin seed, and this is also quite widespread in Turkey. But it is not like harmful as much as the other two species that I mentioned, gibel carp and topmouth gudgeon, because this one, according to some recent work we conducted, we actually didn't find so strong, clear evidence that it impacts negatively to endemic species. So it's been debatable actually, but it's becoming also widespread in Turkey. And the last one is the Cyprinus carpio. It's quite actually a confusing issue in Turkey because they believe that it's introduced species. It's obviously it's not our native species, but it's been like it's not sure, but it was like more than 500, maybe 600 years ago. Probably Romans brought this fish species to produce and as a food resource probably. But in Turkey, it's quite common because it's been stocked everywhere actually to enhance to support fisheries, because when government decided to establish some reservoirs or something, they have to occupy some lands, and then the people who are doing farming there, they had to switch to be the fishermen. So the government should provide some food, some labor for them. Then this is the main stocking fish species. As you see, they say native, but it's quite confusing. Like I said, it's been quite debatable, like I said, because there are some domestic races, semi-domestic races, wild races, and it's been quite how to say, it's quite mixed up situation. But we did some series of papers on it because, like I said, it's been quite common fish species, and there are lots of studies. Then we decided to do some meta-analysis to outline the real situation of the species, and one of them is more relative to your case. We also did it with Lorenzo Velise from Italy. We were able to collate all the data on parasites on common carp. It's kind of updated checklist actually, and the review between 1964 and 2014. And as you see, there are 41 different taxa we found, and of these taxa, two hadn't been previously reviewed for Turkey, so four excluded from the list because of dubious identification. But in the end, in this period, there are lots of issues with the parasites also, because that means it's so widespread. That means all these parasites also have been spread all the country. And another problem with the climate change, probably we will be having more problems with these aquarium fishes, because especially hobbyists release these fish species commonly, and then we are wondering that if it is increased or not after the pandemic, because the people got fed up with these fish species, then they decided to dump it to the wild. That is quite big problem, because we found these fish species, some of them is established populations. That means a big problem, because some areas they established are full of the endemic fish species, and then some of them is quite aggressive and predator. So and this one, the last one, is Calarias batrachus. We found this is unfortunately one of the most worst invasive species, 100 worst invasive species. Maybe it's in the top 10. I don't know. It's because it can like walk, because it's name on it, because walking catfish, but it can walk actually. And this is another. It's a joke, of course, but people always report us that they see it in the middle of the night. They're walking from one water bodies to other water bodies, because they can survive out of water for a long time, and then this is another problem for our waters. So I will talk about a bit our completed projects, and the current projects and the future work, and I will finalize my talk. Sorry if I'm boring you. We did it with on Gobit species, because our main goal was to do some work on biological, age, growth, reproduction, habitat requirements, and food and population genetics of this fish species, because they are native to Black Sea region in Turkey, but non-native to Danube River and the Great Lakes in North America. So they cause really big problems there. Not these peculiar two species, but the round goby, Neogobis melanostomus. And then we thought, our hypothesis is that if we know their bioecological features in their native area, then that would be quite good baseline to compare what they find in their native area, because especially in North America, they did tons of work having these different aspects. So we can, but there's no baseline to compare. So we decided to do this project. so that we can compare and try to understand what is the real reason behind this invasiveness of these species when they introduced. Especially also, this is the case for Danube River. And the another project we completed in 2018. This is on the early warning and monitoring system, but we used this environmental DNA, and then we used this some transboundary rivers coming from outside of Turkey but entering to Turkey. Some of them is just going out from the Turkey, but we suspect from some main river systems coming from Europe and also coming from the Syria, from southern part, and then we try to establish an early warning monitoring system and using some risk assessment tools and molecular tools with the eDNA. This was also a cost action, actually. And the another one, we try to understand the phenotypic plasticity of non-native fish species along its invasion succession, along the invasion phases, stages. And we used Lepomyscus bossus, pumpkin seed here. And then first we try to understand its biological and ecological features. Then when we find a difference between the core of the invasion and the age of the invasion, we had these more than 10 different sampling stations along a river because we knew where it's the first time this fish species is established, and then how it dispersed within the river. So we first try to compare their biological and ecological features, and then do it with some molecular tools, gene expressions, to understand if they really based on this behavioral background. So we had really nice outputs, and we are now just producing the papers. But it's been really nice work, like more than 3 years. And then also we do some experimental studies just to understand what we find in the field. We are just trying to understand if they confirmed by the experimental studies, just out of some environmental factors. We just try to focus some environmental factors, if they really the real factors that affect their invasiveness or not. And then also we took into consideration of climate change scenarios. We just tried different temperatures to understand these differences. Also, we use some what if scenarios. We use some fish species, native and non-native species, doesn't coexist yet, but could be in the future. So we did these experimental studies to see what if they coexist. And then we also found some interesting results. And then we have some current projects. This one is on educational capacity training, capacity building project. It's kind of educational oriented, of course. But the main idea here is to increase the educational capacity of some Western Balkan region. We are incorporating some lectures on invasive biology into their curriculum to increase the awareness of the species of the invasive biology in general. So we are including some stakeholders and some local target groups. It's like I said, it's educational oriented, but we also follow this. We are trying to also incorporate some scientific aspect with doing some modern, up-to-date techniques to increase this impact of this project. The other one is again European Union based project. It's on invasive alien species traits in and terrestrial areas. Actually, I'm working here as a fish expert, also kind of deputy team leader, because it's quite comprehensive project. It has kind of several target groups and stakeholders. But the main idea here to ensure the resilience of ecosystems. I mean, the main idea here is to get this proper management of invasive species, especially how to control, how to eradicate these invasive alien species. Some of them is not possible to eradicate, of course, but we still try to control, contain their further disperse or spread. And of course, increasing again public awareness and developing management capacity of the staff of the institutions, because it includes also some ministry based of staff. So, like I said, there are only two fish species here, but we have plant species, mammalian, reptile, and birds. All of these fish species, they had these pilot areas for us to work. And but in the end we will produce some action plans, national action plans to combat with these spaces widely in the country. So what is our future work? We our recent interest into, of course, climate change as a worldwide pattern, and we just try to now combine and incorporate the climate change models to our ecological studies. Like we did it for rainbow trout. It is a different issue, because the rainbow trout in Turkey cannot reproduce by itself, because we have, I mean, it has to be cultivated in some farms or something. It needs human intervention to reproduce, but still there are lots of farms in Turkey. It's number one widespread aquaculture species, and there are tons of reports of escapes, and then we don't know how these fish species will behave in the wild. There was no study on it, so we decided to do it with the climate change, and we did it with also risk identification tools, and we developed some algorithms to reveal what is the real impact in current situation, and our aim is to strengthen this idea to do some future scenarios, like what will happen in 2050, 2100, and this is our future aim. Actually, we are aiming to do that with some other fish species as well. Also, we are using this molecular approach coupling with the risk assessment for the new introductions. This is the another work. And also, we are trying to understand how endemic fish species are affected by invasive species as a niche models, and gene expression, like I mentioned before, and niche plasticity, how this niche plasticity affect these fish species. This is our future aims, and I'm finalizing. But before finalizing, it's maybe more important than the presentation. We did some collaboration work with your institute in Czech Republic, in Brno. It started with, like, I think it was 2006 or 7. We met with Martin Reinhardt and Carl Smith from UK, and we agreed on working on this bitterling mussel coevolutionary study. And we work in Turkey here, like in Lake Sapanca area. The main idea was to understand the coevolutionary relationship between the mussel and this bitterling, is Rhodeus amarus. It was a species in Turkey, of course, but in China, and I mean, ancient sympatry was in China, and they also collected some really nice data sets from China. And then the Black Sea region, actually, it was kind of middle of the new and old world. So we provided the data from the middle of this recent and ancient sympatry, but we had really nice work together in Lake Sapanca for 3 years in a row, and then yeah, it produced this paper, which is great actually. And after that, in July 2010, we visited Brno. We stayed there for 3 weeks, almost 3 weeks, I guess, with two of my colleagues, and we studied with drift, young of the year of Cyprinids. Because I had these samples from my PhD. There was some complications with my supervisor, some other problems. Then I had to switch my subject of my PhD to some ecosystem-based modeling or something like that. But my first intention was to work on drift samples, drift ecology of young of the year, and Martin had really nice papers on this issue, and then I asked for help from him, and then he invited us to Brno, and then we did this identification with thanks to his help. But it's a pity that we haven't got them published yet. But we'll still it's still in the planning, not in the processing, but in the planning. And then yeah, we had really nice time in Brno. There were some other photos, but not suitable for the presentation. I sent them in Miha last night. We also enjoyed being there. And my last slide, we keep collaborating internationally, of course, on these invasive species from different parts of the world. But like I said, when I work in England, it was like 10 years in a row. I didn't stay continuously, but each year I was there like 2, 3, 4 months, and then we did some work on some threatened fish species, which is crucian carp, Carassius. We had these 3 projects in a row. One of them supported by the municipality of the Norfolk in England, and yeah, and after that we try to understand what is the impact of goldfish, Carassius auratus, in a non-native invasive fish species to this crucian carp, and we switched to our the way to there, and then yeah, I've been keeping collaborating with some other people from all over the world. Actually, this is from France, and this is from Spain. This, for instance, this albonus, it's quite native here, but in Spain, it's looks like it. Public enemy #1. They really concerned about it. So I participated in these studies. Also, apparently with Poland, with the Polish colleagues, we had these studies together. Yeah. Okay. I think I talked too much. Hopefully you're still alive. But thank you very much for your patience. And yeah, hopefully I can be more. Well, we are already working together, but hopefully we will find this chance to meet face to face. Yeah, how to pronunciation, I don't know, but Jacqui, you say?
Děkuji.
Jacqui, okay, Jacqui then.
Okay, thank you very much, Sir Hein. It wasn't too much, don't worry. We are still under the hour, so don't worry about it.
Okay, great.
And thank you again for the wonderful presentation. I think that maybe some of you might ask themselves that how exactly is this connected with the parasitological seminar? But as Serhan mentioned in the beginning, that those invasive species, or invasive, in the case fish, also any other species, are quite, we can consider them as the parasites on the native environment, as they are living on the expense of the native species. And moreover, as we were also discussing previously on other seminars, those invasive species serve as the vectors for transmitting diseases. And also Serhan mentioned that they can provide something like what we call as the parasite spillover, when those invasive fish introduce the new pathogens into the native region for the non-native regions. So there is quite importance to know what is actually the threat regarding the invasive species in your region at all. So this is what the Serhan is focused on. And I thank you again for the presentation. And now I would like to open discussion section. So if any of you have any question on Serhan research, on Serhan on its own, or anything else, you can just raise the hand by pressing the button on the top of the screen, and I will call you and you can ask any question.
I closed the presentation, but I can reopen if you like. I mean,
yeah, maybe if somebody will have some specific question.
Yeah, so, sure.
Anyone? Anything? If not, I will maybe start with the discussion. I prepared few questions. I don't know how much time we will may have for those. I was quite surprised that in one of your first or the papers from the beginning, you were discussing that how the invasive fish are, or what are the threat levels of the native fish, for the native fish by the invasive fish, and there was the degree of threat or level of threat to those. How was that estimated?
Well, actually, we use this path that we first try to do it with the semi-quantitative tool, which is so-called as is. It's kind of a tool that we could assess the potential invasiveness of the species, but it depends on the risk assessment area. It can change with some even some neighboring regions. But first, we are trying to understand if these fish species introduced this area, is it possible? How possible is the fish species becoming invasive or not? And then there is this semi-quantitative evaluation, is that it's starting from low and medium and high and very high of potential of being invasive. And then when we if you find these fish species kind of problematical for us, then we started to do it some field work, do some feeding interactions through this recently through isotope analysis. If there is this because it is possible also for us to see with the isotope analysis to niche modeling, niche overlapping, also the habitat overlapping as well. Mm-hmm. Because nitrogen and carbon isotopic niches could give this insight to us to understand the real impact. If there's an impact, then they share the niche, and then they share the food, mm-hmm. And that means also they share the habitat. So this is the way. The another way, it recently we started to follow this relative invader impact. It is experimental, but we put some fish species, individual by individual, and we fed them with some prey, and then there is this algorithm to understand which one is more aggressive, which one is more feeding, consuming these praise, and then we do some further algorithms to understand if there is real impact or not. So it's kind of series of studies to understand this, but it's not like that. Okay, this is invasive or this is not invasive. It's a bit complex, but there is a way to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, so basically we can estimate that what is the potential of the fish species, non-native fish species, to be invasive in a specific region, in that specific area. But
Yeah.
I think that in that paper you also reported that how big under the risk under how big risk are the native species of the specific native species, right? That you can estimate it, for example, that albornoz just like some, I don't know, some example will be more impacted by the invasive species, or those squalios will be less impacted, or so on. You can also use that analysis for that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, when we use these series of studies, then it's possible to see that. But for instance, some endemic species quite local endemics, which means they really under threat. Even if there's no maybe niche overlapping or something, it's they are in advance. We classified them as a threatened species because they have really restricted, limited distribution area, which is quite concerning for them. But for widespread natives, we don't concern that much. But in terms of if you determine a risk assessment area, and if you peculiarly work in that risk assessment area, of course that fish space is also classified by different level of concern.
Okay, thank you. Do any of you have any other questions, Abraham? You don't need to be afraid. You can ask anything. For example, how he enjoyed his time in the Brno and so on. Even maybe he can show you those secret photos he sent me yesterday.
Especially from the local breweries,
Yeah, of course.
They were my most favorite places.
Yeah, maybe somebody will follow up my next question. I was also quite interested or surprised by the number of the invasive species, which is increasing by the decade. And that you estimated there is 4.6 new non-native species in the region by decade. But it's probably, sorry, my phone, it's probably have to reach some threshold, right? Because I don't know, some interest in the fish and the invasiveness connected by the mechanical transport, for example, if it's ornamental fish or some fish which should be like for the prey or for the hunting or fisheries and so on, like with some economical importance, it have to reach some threshold somewhere in the future, right?
Yeah, that should be, but I can't foresee, what time, I mean, when this threshold we will be reaching actually, because especially increasing trade of aquarium in this pet trade, and some fish species being important for their economic importance. So it was kind of difficult for us to prevent those spaces, because, for instance, when somebody wants to invest really big money in like there's the shrimp spaces, for instance, because it was the case, and then they ask the ministry, and the ministry should ask the scientist if it is okay to import or not. It wasn't case actually, but recently they started to advise and take advice from us, which is good actually, and so actually by increasing this awareness, by increasing awareness in everywhere. I mean, in the ministry, in the decision makers, in the people, in the local fishermen. I mean, generally, when this public awareness increase, then I believe this, this rate will be somehow will be reached a threshold, and then maybe it started to decrease as well. But for now, it looks like kind of inevitable to stop these new introductions.
Yeah, of course. That's actually my first question, which I have here since the beginning. That how is going the ongoing, ongoing active forcing people how to stop introduce the species on their own, and how are you obstructing that that to the locals, and how are you forbidding that, whether you are fining them with some money or some so.
Yeah, well, it's really difficult. I mean, because this was the case for even really developed countries. I know from the England
Yeah,
experience.
exactly. It's problem everywhere. So I was just
Yeah,
wondering how is it going in
because in
Turkey right now.
Turkey, I don't know how is it in Czech Republic, but in Turkey, when you increase the penalties or something, it becomes more attractive for the people to go around, and
They don't really
it's the
care
case.
actually. You can do during the night almost anything, and the only difference is maybe that you can do basically anything with those invasive species. You can hunt them, you can catch them, you can take them home or do whatever you want without any fine or something like that, because they are not native in
Yeah,
the.
yeah. There were some cases that we, time to time we interview with the fishermen, and sometimes they regret, what they did actually. For instance,
Mhm.
some of them say, "Oh, okay, we introduced this fish species here because it was colorful, looked to us really
Yeah,
nice."
wonderful.
And then after 10 years, after probably even less than a decade, they regret it because they just wipe out or other their economic spaces. And yeah, this was the case. And sometimes we show this as an example. Please
Mhm.
do not do that.
Yeah, people are dumb. Okay, thank you. Any other question? If Farshad is asking, I think. I know he's just mentioning it was nice to see you again. So anybody of you have any question? Somebody? Anybody else? If Farshad is raising the hand, so you can ask.
Arshad has the question in the comment section.
Ah, yeah, right. So I will read you the question to
Okay.
everyone. So he would like to ask about risk assessment protocols. Did you localize it for Turkey? What is the base method for it? And is it based on experts' evaluation? There
Oh
are
yeah.
some following questions, but we can go, for example, one by one right now.
Yeah. Okay. I start from the last question. It is of course expert based questions. I mean expert based tool. Uh, there definitely need experts, especially species expert. Not like okay, I'm expert in invasive biology. It's not like that. You have to be a species expert to do that. And actually, it's not the risk assessment, because risk assessment is really something comprehensive, not only doing. What we are doing is to just the identification, risk screening. Actually, if we find out this fish species has a potential to be invasive, and then we switch to do it for full scale of assessment, which also includes some other components. I mean, it is something completely different thing that I need to maybe in if you are interested in another webinar. It's kind of a completely different issue, but the question from Farshad can be answered that yeah, it is expert-based evaluation and only on risk screening, not the assessment. The risk assessment is a complete, belong to another world. It's lots of work, but the screening, and there's a tool which we call, like I said, aquatic species screening invasiveness kit. There were more than 50 questions. You're answering like there are questions on biology, ecology, their detrimental effects, and their management and climate change effects. And then you're answering the questions, whether you're yes, no, or I don't know. And then you also score like how confident your responses are, like low, medium, high confidence. And then in the end, it gives you a score, and then you calculate a threshold for a region, for a risk assessment area. And then after that, it's possible to evaluate that, okay, if it is, your specific score is higher than this threshold, you can say, okay, it has a high potential to be invasive. It is less than that threshold score, then you can say, okay, it's not so a big issue or something like that. Yeah, it's not easy to explain this within 5-10 minutes, but this is a different different talk, issue of a different talk, I guess. But overall, superficially, it is the case. Yeah.
You're actively trying to prepare it as much unbiased as is possible to answer that other question.
Sure. That's why we need to experts. Very good experts on spaces.
But not only one, many of them, to get some.
Yeah. This is the main. This is the usual
consensus.
Practice. Not only one, but we usually use more than 2 or 3 really good experts. Sometimes there's a conflict in the answers. So sometimes it turns out that for instance, I skipped some information hidden in the literature, or if you have some observes on spaces. So if you don't know the real answer, so maybe somebody else could know. So yeah, it's a multiple. It needs multi experts evaluation for sure.
There is also the last part of this question, and whether there is a place for introduced pathogens in those protocols, or it's not not concerning that.
Yes, I think it's more than 4 or 5 questions. Just peculiarly, completely on the pathogens in the endemics, pathogens in the invasiveness. I know there are some questions. And then I will be talking, by the way, it's just speaking of which I will be talking on this issue in the 27th of this month in Iranian Ichthyological Congress. By the way, they invited me to. I will be giving some invited speech. If you like, I can share the advertisement. Then you can. Because it's all online and open for everyone, so maybe Farshad can join.
Yeah. Okay. So if everything is answered for Farshad, and whether maybe somebody else has any question. Just a quick question from me. Those bitterlings you were investigating with Martin in Turkey at Sapanca Lake, those are utilizing the same mussels as the host as they are also using in the Eastern Asia? The same species of the mussels, or they are not specific in that case?
No, that was the main hypothesis, actually, because in China, where they occur natively, there are more than, I don't know, 15, 20 species of bitterling, and a lot more mussel species than Turkey. Black Sea region and Europe. In Europe and Turkey, only Rhodes amarus as a bitterling, and in Turkey we had these.
Also Orientalis?
No, we don't have it here. But yeah, it's debatable. Maybe they have already discovered. I don't know. But we had also four or five muscle spaces, but their responses are quite different. I mean, because Bitterling is trying to put their eggs into the muscle, but some muscle spaces is just ejected immediately. Some of them is quite naive and they just accepted them, but in the end they can end up dead, because these also eggs are consuming oxygen. So, but muscles also need this bitterling for them to stick this glochidia, their eggs actually to gills of the fish. So it's kind of co-evolutionary issue, but it was quite interesting. It's still interesting. I think they're still going on these studies. I'm not sure, but Carl in England and Martin there, probably they're still going on.
Yeah, they are still working on that co-evolution relationships. Okay, there is one follow-up question from Farshad. He's asking that whether you can quickly tell him the difference between risk assessment and screening.
When risk assessment, there are different components. For instance, you have to look for the risk assessment area. If it is, for instance, a facility, a aquaculture facility, for instance, you have to get much more information. What is the size of the facility? What is the captivity possibilities? And for instance, there is a different component only for pathogens. If this fish species carries any pathogen, because in risk screening, this is just yes or no question. But when you do it as an assessment, there are a lot of different components. For instance, risk screening is only one component of those multi-components of the assessment. In the assessment, if I'm not mistaken, 6 or 7 different components. Then you have to answer all of them, but only one of them is this screening. If you find out this fish species is kind of having this potential to be invasive, then you can only skip these other. You can only pass the other components in the assessment, and each component has different aspect. Like I said, risk assessment area, the region, environment. If this facilities, the features of the facility, lots of, and also economical analysis it needs, and management. How to do the proper management of the spaces if it is introduced or something. I can share if you guys like to learn further. They're quite different.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I think that Farshad is also satisfied with the answer.
I can provide him separately some info if he is still interested in to learn about it.
Yeah, I think that we can discuss it on our own later.
Yeah.
And he looks like he's interested in that, so probably.
Okay.
Okay. So I think, is there any other question, Serhan, by anybody else? Don't be afraid. Don't be shy. Don't worry. Nobody.
Michal, it is used. I mean, it is the common sense here it's language barrier here. For instance, I mean, the people just hesitate. I usually act as a translator here when we had something similar here in Turkey, because they have these questions, but they were too shy to ask because of the language.
Yeah.
So
if that's the case, you can ask Serhan by email, for example, or something like that. You can call him. You can provide
this is what I was going to tell. Yeah.
Okay, so I think that it could be the end of our discussion section. So thank you very much again Serhan, for answering all the questions and also for the presentation again. And I hope that we will see each other again some soon in person. And hopefully we'll be also able to visit Brno again after several
yeah, this is my intention. Yeah, hopefully.
Maybe you won't remember it the same as it is.
Oh yeah, definitely. That would be lovely. Yeah.
So thank you again. And all the other participants, I would like to invite to the next seminar, which will be next week. The speaker will be Sharka Mashova. She will be speaking about, she will be talking about her investigation, her field trips, and the whole research in the Antarctica. And if you will be interested to come, you can. Well, the next seminar will be in person and in the lecture room, so probably not available for everyone. But so you are welcome, and I am looking forward to see all of you in person next week. There is only one issue that Sharka wrote me yesterday, I think it was, that there are some issues, family issues for her, that maybe she won't be able to attend next week. So I will keep you posted about whether the seminar will actually be occurring or not. But right now it looks like that it should be next week. But if something will happen, I will let you know. So thank you again, and see you again soon. Bye.
Okay, thank you all. Bye.
Yeah, bye, Serhan.
Bye.
And everybody else.